All right, so get this. Today we're going deep, like deep into the world of immigration DNA testing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to break down how this whole thing works, especially what happens right here in the US at those collection sites.
Okay, yeah.
Now you might be thinking, DNA testing? Like that sounds kind of, I don't know, boring.
Yeah, a little bit.
But trust me, it's actually way more fascinating than you'd think.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking international stuff, super precise science, real people's stories, all mixed up together.
Huh, okay.
It's wild. One of the things that surprised me was this group called the AABB.
The what?
The AABB, yeah. They're like the watchdogs of this whole process.
Interesting.
They make sure everything's legit, follows the rules.
Oh, okay.
Do you know they used to be all about blood banks?
Hmm.
Which just shows you how DNA's gotten into everything these days.
Yeah, wow, it really has. And their role in this immigration thing is huge.
Totally. So, like, imagine you've got this person, a U.S. citizen, who wants to sponsor a family member to come to the U.S.
Right, the petition.
Exactly. And then you've got the beneficiary, the person who's trying to immigrate.
Right, hoping to become a citizen or get a green card.
Okay, so why do they even need DNA testing? Don't they have, like, birth certificates and stuff?
Sometimes those documents are missing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, especially folks coming from countries where record keeping isn't so organized,
Makes sense.
Or maybe the documents they do have, well, their questions about them need more proof. That's where the DNA steps in,
This is the ultimate proof, huh?
pretty much. But it's definitely not just a quick swab and you're done.
I figured.
The AABB, they have this thing called chain of custody, like super strict tracking of those
In
samples.
custody, huh?
Yep, everyone who touches those samples from the collection site to the lab got to sign off. Guarantee nothing's messed up.
Whoa. Intense.
Seriously, if that chain breaks, the whole case would be thrown out.
Yikes. High stakes. So let's say you're the petitioner, you've got all your paperwork, paid the fees, you're at the collection site. What happens next?
Well, first, they got to make sure you're eligible, all your documents are legit.
Right, makes sense.
Like a missing passport, that could really mess things up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Then there's the whole tech side of things.
Tech side.
Yeah, the collection site uses special software to put all your info into a secure system, like a digital chain of custody.
Fancy.
It is. And then there's the payment part.
Ah, yes, the money part. Who pays for all this?
Well, it's actually two separate payments, which is kind of weird.
Two? Why two?
The AABB is super strict about, avoiding any conflicts of interest.
So no funny business.
Exactly. So the petitioner, they pay the lab directly for the DNA testing, but the collection site, they can only charge for their services. The paperwork, the swabbing, the shipping.
I see.
And even then, there are rules about who can pay.
Wow, they thought of everything. So payments are done.
Yeah.
Then they finally break out the swabs, right?
Right, but even that is super precise. Yeah. Got to get informed consent, collect those samples using special sterile swabs, label everything perfectly, take photos of you and your ID, the whole 9 yards.
To prove it's really you.
Exactly. And then that whole kit, samples, paperwork, everything gets packaged up super carefully and shipped off to the lab.
Using, like, a special courier.
Of course. Got to keep that chain of custody unbroken.
No dropping the baton in this relay race.
Nope. So the U.S. collection site has done its part. The package is off. But wait, the beneficiary? They're usually in another country, right?
Right.
So how do those samples cross borders?
Good question.
That's where the U.S. Embassy gets involved.
The embassy.
Yep. They act as the go-between, coordinating the sample collection overseas. Imagine that. A U.S. Embassy on the other side of the world dealing with these DNA kits from a lab here.
Whoa, that's global.
It is. So the embassy collects the beneficiary samples using those same super strict procedures and ships everything back to the lab here.
Okay, so then what? What do they actually DO with those samples at the lab?
That's where the real science magic happens, right? They extract the DNA, analyze it, compare the samples, and create a report that's super important for the whole immigration decision.
Sounds complicated.
It is. But we'll dive into all those lab details after a quick, well, we'll just keep going, I guess.
Right into the science.
Exactly.
All right, so we've sent those samples off to the lab.
Yeah.
But I'm still kind of fuzzy on what they're actually, looking for and all that DNA stuff.
Well, think of it like they're playing a matching game, right?
A matching game.
Yeah, but with DNA, they're comparing the petitioner's DNA to the beneficiary's DNA,
Oh.
looking for these special markers that show they're related biologically.
So it's not just like checking if it's human DNA or something.
Nope. It's way more specific than that. It's about proving those family ties, the biological connection,
So like a parent and child would share more of those markers than distant cousins.
Exactly. The closer the relationship, the more markers they'll have in common.
Makes sense.
And the lab uses some serious math, like statistical analysis, to figure out how likely that relationship is.
So it's not just a simple yes or no.
Right. They come up with a number, a combined paternity index,
Right.
or CPI.
CPI.
Yeah, and that number tells you how strong the genetic evidence is.
So higher CPI, stronger evidence.
You got it. Like a CPI over 100, that's usually strong evidence of a biological relationship.
Okay, so these numbers can really make or break a case, huh?
Absolutely. The lab is going to be super accurate, no room for mistakes there.
Man, that's a lot of pressure.
It is. But it shows how far DNA technology has come. You know, it can literally bring families together, help people achieve their immigration dreams because it's objective scientific proof.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. So the lab's done their work, analyzed those samples, created the report. Then what?
Yeah, who gets to see those results? Is it like a big reveal or something?
Well, the petitioner gets notified first by email that the results are ready.
Oh.
They can see the report online. Then the lab sends copies to whoever requested the testing, usually the U.S. Embassy.
Right, so they have the evidence they need to make a decision.
Exactly. So let's see, we started at the collection site. The lab does its thing, and then the results go back to the people in charge.
All thanks to those little swabs.
It's wild, right? This whole process, it's global. You've got labs here, embassies all over, families spread across continents, all connected by these DNA tests.
Science bringing people together.
It is. But let's be real. What happens if those results aren't what they were hoping for? What if the DNA doesn't support their claim?
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
It is. And unfortunately, it doesn't always have a happy ending, you know? If the DNA evidence doesn't match up, it can really hurt their case.
So it's not as simple as just giving more documents or asking for another test.
It depends. But a lot of times, if the DNA isn't there, the immigration petition could get denied.
Man, that's heartbreaking. They've gone through so much, hoping to be together.
It is. And it just shows how much weight those DNA test results carry.
It's like this technology. It can both reunite families, ANA, keep them apart. So complicated.
It is. DNA testing is powerful, right? For truth and justice,
Right.
But it's not a magic wand. Got to use it carefully, ethically, thinking about the human impact.
Totally agree.
So we've gone through this whole DNA maze, from swabs to lab analysis, seen the different outcomes, learned about the science, the logistics, the human side of it all.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. Hopefully our listener understands this whole immigration DNA testing thing better now, how important it is.
I think they do. But before we wrap things up, there's one more thing. We've talked about how it all works, but what about the bigger picture? Like the ethics of using DNA like this?
That's a great point. You know, tech isn't just neutral. It's always part of the bigger picture, society, politics, especially something as sensitive as immigration.
So even though DNA seems pretty straightforward, like you're related or you're not, there's more to it, huh?
Way more.
Okay, so we're back. And the more we dig into this stuff, the more interesting it gets, right? We've seen how immigration DNA testing works, but now I'm thinking, what about the bigger picture? The ethics of using DNA like this?
Yeah, that's a big one. It's easy to forget the technology isn't neutral. It's always part of something bigger. Society, politics, all that. And we're talking about something as sensitive as immigration. We got to be extra careful.
Right, so it's not just about the science, it's about how we use this science.
Exactly. I mean, on the one hand, DNA testing can be a good thing for immigration, right? It can help prevent fraud, make sure things are fair.
Because it's like hard proof, right? You can't really argue with your DNA.
Yeah, exactly. It's objective, scientific. But we got to remember, there are real people involved, families, with their whole lives on the line.
It's not just numbers on a lab report.
Right. We got to be super careful that this check isn't misused or that it ends up hurting certain groups of people more than others.
So discrimination.
Could happen. We got to think about privacy, consent, all those things.
Speaking of privacy, what happens to those DNA samples after the testing is done? Who has access to that info?
That's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
And could it be used for something other than immigration? We need to make sure that there are rules in place to protect people's information, their rights.
It's really sensitive stuff, and it makes you wonder about the impact on families. We talked about how emotional this whole process is, people hoping to be reunited. What if those DNA results aren't clear? Or they don't, meet whatever the requirements are?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, could we actually be creating need-W barriers for families by relying on DNA, especially those who might have a legitimate claim but don't have all the paperwork?
It's almost like a catch-22.
It could be. And then there's the cost of all this. If DNA testing becomes mandatory for everyone, Could some people just not afford it?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. And those are just some of the ethical questions we need to grapple with. We got to look at the big picture, the potential consequences, both good and bad, and make sure we're using this technology responsibly. It's about fairness.
Well, I feel like we've really gone deep today. We've covered so much ground, from tiny swabs to global embassies, from the science of DNA to, well, the human side of immigration and all the ethical questions in between. It's been a real deep dive.
It really has. I hope our listener has a better understanding of this whole world now, how fascinating it is, but also how complex.
I think they do. It's a good reminder that technology is always changing, and how we use it really matters. It affects people's lives.
And that's why it's so important to stay curious, ask questions,
Yeah,
keep learning.
totally agree. So, to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new today. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains working.
See ya.